Thank God this is the news for today. The United Nations demands that all central banks, that means the European Central Bank and the Federal Reserve of the United States and other central banks, stop rate hikes and switch to price controls instead. This is by Michael Every of Rabobank on Zero Hedge. And Every says, blinkers and you'll miss it. New week, new month, new quarter, new brains, new trades, new hope, or new balls, please, as they say at Wimbledon. I don't have the physical energy to play tennis with markets on an every other day basis, sending a detailed volley back to those who think the Fed is about to pivot because of one bad data point. That does not mean the UK government can't, though. They just did exactly that on tax cuts. All I can say is reread what I've been saying all year about this being about more than just data. And I'm told every gold bug, kryptonite, bond bubble boy, equity enthusiast, derivative devil, property shill, and commodity compeer is sitting on the sidelines bleeding out and is waiting for the Fed to pivot in order to go all in on the next inflationary everything asset bubble. What does interest me enough to cover today is 1. UNCTAD, the UN agency dealing with global trade, demanding all central banks stop rate hikes and instead switch to price controls. They argue policymakers appear to be hoping that a short, sharp monetary shock along the lines, if not of the same magnitude, as that pursued under Paul Volcker, will be sufficient to anchor inflationary expectations without triggering recession. Sifting through the economic entrails of bygone era is unlikely, however, to provide the forward guidance needed for a softer landing, given the deep structural and behavioral changes that have taken place in many economies, particularly those related to financialization, market concentration, and labor's bargaining power. I am not playing tennis with them either, but note the radicalism. Indeed, their latest report also argues supply chain disruptions and labor shortages require appropriate industrial policies to increase the supply of key items in the medium term. This must be accompanied by sustained global policy coordination and liquidity support to help countries fund and manage these changes. So industrial policy and Fed swap lines expect both ahead. They also ask why we have not regulated shadow banking and why we allow speculators in global commodity markets who have nothing to do with underlying trade. On the latter, they note market surveillance authorities could be mandated to intervene directly in exchange trading on an occasional basis by buying or selling derivatives contracts with a view to averting price collapses or deflating price bubbles. I expect nothing but that ahead, and geopolitically driven to boot. Number 2, New York Times op-ed, a U.S. Ships Act would break China's control of the seas. Repeated last month, Voice of America, VOA, as China expands its fleet, U.S. analysts call for catch-up efforts. That as China builds more naval and merchant ships, U.S. maritime experts are calling for a Ships Act comparable to the recently enacted CHIPS Act, recalling the effort undertaken in World War II when domestic shipyards launched more than 5,000 vessels. One expert states the Chinese industrial base is a behemoth and the U.S. shipbuilding industry base is freakishly undersized as a function of the size of America's economy and its influence in the world. This was a key argument in 2021's In Deep Ship on maritime logistics. The U.S. would go back to the sea to underpin industry and its Mahan geostrategy. Such U.S. actions would be inflationary before they were deflationary and taken as incendiary. Number 3, an article in the Financial Times, investors are learning to love industry again. Noting in deglobalizing world, there is a structural boom in parts of the U.S. manufacturing being led by federal efforts to domesticize supply chains via legislation and shift from just-in-time to just-in-case shorter supply chains, decoupling from China, productively enhancing technology, and an overlooked U.S. equivalent of Germany's middle stand of middle-sized family-owned companies. Ironically, Germany is about to see a cascading failure of its industrial base due to the cataclysmic failure of its energy policies, and the U.S. having abundant, cheaper energy is another structural argument for an industrial revival there. Can you imagine a world where savers get 4 to 5% return and banks lend to firms making physical goods, generating decent returns for all? Is this science fiction possible again? Not if we get a Fed pivot, of course, then we fire up and everything bubble again instead. For those who still don't want to see any of the above, I offer a gift far more useful than any intellectual return, volley. Indeed, to show that it's not only central banks who provide free things, below please find a large amount of free blank space on which you can draw your own cutout and keep. Intellectual blinkers, just print out the page, draw one that's fit, cut them out, and place them around your head in order to keep out all the annoying news and data that does not fit your worldview and trading book, allowing you to happily keep punting as if 1, the Fed pivot is coming, and 2, said pivot will take us back to good to old 2019, not bad old 1971 or 1913. What can I say? So this is by Michael Every of Rabobank on Zero Hedge. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.